Good morning. My name's Jason with Hudson Valley Wireless. I'm going to be moderating the panel discussion here for strategic planning for WISP America. So I'm joined here today with our esteemed panelist, John Scrivener. John, would you be able to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thank you for letting me be part of this with you folks. I'm Vice President of Broadband Lending at Live Oak Bank. I've had 20 years experience in the cable television and fixed wireless broadband industries. I served on the founding board of WISPA and its first president. And so I look forward to sharing some of what 30 years in the trenches has taught me.
And then next we have Emma Fox. Emma's with Midco. Emma, would you be able to introduce yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Jason, for organizing this and WISPA for facilitating this remote conference. I am Emma Fox. I'm the product manager for fixed wireless and multi-dwelling units at Midco. We're an ISP based out of Sioux Falls, South Dakota.
Okay. And then last we have Heather Douglas, Heather Douglas Wilkins with Crown Castle. Heather, would you be able to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Good morning. Jason, thanks for having me as well. I'm the Director of Vertical Sales for Crown Castle. So my team supports anything non-Big Four. So we have a direct focus, particularly with the WISPA board and team. We actually have a new dedicated vertical market manager that's focused on the space too. So we're actually really happy to be here today.
Well, thank you all for joining us. So we're going to jump in and just go over a brief overview of what is strategic planning. And that's really what are we doing now? What do we want to do in the future? And then how do we get there? So with strategic planning, it starts with the planning stage. And then we want to be able to define our objectives, set the priorities, and then also work on the implementation. Now, implementation is going to be key when you look at your team's unique abilities to execute the project. So you don't want to be taking on projects if your team doesn't have the capacity or capabilities to be working on that. And as we look at strategic planning, we have our normal strategic planning, and we're going to be doing a special COVID-19 edition of this presentation. And we're going to be talking about how do we do some strategic planning in today's day and age. I think we're all going to look back on year 2020 and how that's changed the way that we do business. And our panelists are going to be able to talk about how to work within the new now. So every beginning should start with an end in mind. And operators need to also plan on an exit strategy. That could involve mergers and acquisitions. That could be selling the WISP to a friendly individual. Or maybe it's your cash cow or a lifestyle company. But you want to figure out what is going to be the right time to exit and how do you exit with both setting yourself up financially as well as making sure that you can keep sustained operations for the community. So M&A can be a win-win situation for companies with complementary skills, and they can also save by combining some resources. Bigger companies, it's more about efficiency and ways to grow their revenue. But there could be roll-up opportunities, aggregation. John, you've been on both sides of the experience, both on the buy side and the sell side, and now you're on the funding side of M&A transactions. What type of advice can you give the audience just so they can plan for the exit?
It's always a good idea to try to think of every possible scenario that can go the wrong way. And I know that sounds rather pessimistic, but ultimately, if you look at every scenario from all angles and every possible outcome of what is the best case, worst case, all the scenarios that can play out, and you work through those about how you would handle each one of those, then ultimately you can build a plan and you can learn to roll with the changes for whatever the future brings. Whether it's selling your company or combining with another company or buying another company. There are lots of things to think about. Do the companies actually have good culture? Will they combine well? How will the customers react? Do they have the same values? Are equipment standards similar between the two for the type of equipment used? These are all things, billing systems. But what most people don't realize is that it's those little things that make all the difference. A customer gets used to the way that they check their email. And if that goes away or changes, some of them react violently to small changes. So it's a really good idea to look at every scenario.
Oh, thank you. And I think that's a good segue into visions and core values. Many of our WISP operators provide essential services to the local community, and many of them started by providing services to their neighbor, and then they've expanded the network and focusing on unserved and underserved communities. Now, John, you were an early adopter in the fixed wireless technology, and you've seen how the industry has evolved from basically two guys in a truck to large corporations serving tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of subscribers. Do you have any advice for WISPA operators on how to define their vision or mission? And as these companies continue to grow, how important is it to define the corporate vision and then cascade that down to the employees that provide the service within the communities?
And that is, I mean, it's obviously important. One has to decide how far you want to take something. A lot of people are very content and comfortable being a small operator, and if they are, then that's where they need to design and build their mission around serving the interest of their local area or how big an area that they want to serve. But for a lot of people, they have bigger goals, and so they need to think strategically about building a vision and a path to getting those bigger goals, and think about that early on. And so, I mean, the SWOT technique comes into play in everything: business planning, mission statements, long-term growth goals, and it has to do with strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. You take all of that in mind, and you look at what your plans are going to be, and you build your mission and your vision around those things.
Oh, perfect. And then Emma, how would you make that vision live within the company?
Yeah, so I think the most important thing here is that your vision statement is meant to help you say no to things too, right? It's not just about making it easy to say yes, it's about making it really easy for your employees to say no where appropriate. So if you, like this vision that we've listed here, our vision is to make broadband internet access available to homes and businesses. That makes it really easy when your team's out there. If someone asks, do you offer phone? Do you offer these other things? They know that they can say, no, this is what we're all about. So making it simple and concrete can really help it live with your employees because they understand exactly what they're meant to be doing and what your growth strategy is. As John said, your growth strategy is critical. Are you looking to grow top line because you want to be purchased, or are you really focused on bottom line because you're managing this more as a cash cow? Making sure that your employees understand your objectives and you have a concrete, specific vision statement enables those values to go all the way down so people understand how to behave and the behavior you're looking for.
Oh, thank you. And that's excellent advice. We've learned a long time ago that you can't be everything to everyone. And it's very good to be able to kind of focus on a vision and execute. So Heather, you've done a good job of putting together a couple of these slides. Would you be able to tell us about defining core market?
Yeah, so as you jump into, once you kind of develop that vision, you have that focus, there's a big part of this that also comes into, really the basic pillars of, what markets are you going to go after to? And that really boils down to the who, the what, and the where. And you want to be very focused and really look at the data of, where are the core customers at? What are their trends? What are their needs? What products and services are you offering? To Emma's point, if your vision statement says it's focused on this, how do those products map to those particular customers that are in those areas? And then what are the coverage areas, right? If you're going to go after certain, markets, you want to make sure you're not only focused on those core customers, maybe also adjacent opportunities like medical, business, education. So you want to really tie all three of those together and map out what that core market strategy is, so that you can ensure as you're going into a market that your team knows what that is, they know what their targets are, they know what their priorities are, and that bolsters around that full vision when you're defining that core market from the top and also cascading that down. And then when you look at kind of defining your product, it's one where you really want to look at the quality of what you're providing, and what's the focus? Is your vision and what you're pushing to the market, is your focus really on quality, price, or speed? So this starts to get into that marketing side of things too. Like, what are the trends? What would resonate with your audience? And then also like making sure that you're prepared for disaster recovery as well. And Jason, I know you've got a lot of experience with this, and focusing on like what's most important when you're looking at your primary and your backup, and how do you prepare even for situations like we're in, today. So I don't know if you want to kind of share some of that detail, given it's Hudson Valley Wireless offers disaster recovery and internet backup.
Yeah, and so when we look at the various WISP offerings around the country, there's certain WISPs that focus on the unserved and underserved markets, and that largely plays to the demographics and the service areas. We live in a more populated area in upstate New York, and there's also access to a lot of wireline facilities. So we do focus on a lot of unserved, underserved areas, but where we overlap wireline, there's no sense in competing in a lot of these scenarios. We'd rather be a complementary solution. So typically what we do is we provide backup internet connections to varying degrees, whether it's complete geographic redundancy, wireline redundancy, or carrier redundancy. And then Emma, I'd like to call on you. How do you come up with value propositions? Do you have any advice for that?
I think Heather really struck the nail on the head here. Is you have to understand what your customers want, right? So what are your customers looking for? And then you can base your value proposition off of what is that unmet need that they have that you're uniquely positioned to fill, that also matches your kind of vision statement and what your company is setting out to do. So if your statement is just to, provide internet for the underserved, then it probably doesn't make sense for you to become a backup solution. That's not really what you're trying to focus on. That's not where you're trying to build your expertise. But if you just want to serve an area with internet, then it does make sense. And you can really sit down with some of those customers and ask, what does backup mean for you? How much redundancy? What is your definition of redundancy in these scenarios? What would it mean if this fiber was cut, at this many miles? And so getting as specific as possible into what those customers are really looking for and making sure you really understand their needs will help you create that value proposition. And I do love this graphic here. It's kind of the old joke, speed, quality. You can have it good, faster, easy, pick two, right? And I think that's always true. You can't have everything. And making sure that you understand that and don't try and do everything, because then you'll fail across the board, and have real conversations up front of which two do we want.
No, thank you for that. Just working on advancing the slide here. Okay. Emma, would you be able to describe different methods to evaluate projects?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think there's different types of projects you're going to have. There's proactive ones, and then there's more managing kind of reactively, like the situation we're in right now. John mentioned a SWOT analysis earlier. It's strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. The strengths and weaknesses are really focused on your internal operations, strengths and weaknesses. So as a company, where are you strong, where are you weak? And then that bottom, the opportunities and threats, are externally, where are their opportunities and where are their threats. And your goal is to, be super, super honest and then say, how can I move my internal weaknesses over into strengths, or at least mitigate them? What's my plan to reduce these weaknesses so that they don't end up tripping up my project? And then the same for opportunities and threats. How can I turn a threat into a potential opportunity? And so if you do this for kind of all the projects you're evaluating in a year, you can get a good sense of where there are more opportunities, where do things look a little bit riskier. One thing I really advise is to do your annual planning once. So put all the projects you're thinking about up against the board, once a year or maybe twice a year, so you can truly analyze them against each other and choose the one that's going to get you the best return for the least risk. If you analyze them all individually, you won't necessarily be able to weigh up the benefit of two different projects, and we are all resource constrained, so we can't do everything. So looking at them at one time helps you pick the best one for your company, not just the best one for that moment. Then it's also always good to do kind of a bit of what you've called a sensitivity analysis here, where you really look at the range of outcomes. So let's say you're looking at backup, this is an example we're using, 2 customers want it, and there's up to 15 customers in that footprint that might want it. What's the range of recurring revenue you think you could get there? Is it worth doing if only those 2 customers take it? How many customers do you need to believe are interested before you move forward, and do you really believe in that? So I think that's kind of the critical piece for those proactive projects. The reactive projects, again, if you should, hopefully, it's hard to say this in the middle of COVID, not be too surprised when they come up. So if a competitor changes pricing or if you get overbuilt, ideally in that same annual planning process, you sit down and you say, what are all of our threats externally and what's our plan if they happen? And that helps you be prepared when those things do occur to, 1, move faster, and 2, make better decisions because you've thought through them in a time of a little bit less stress. So you have kind of a game plan that you've all agreed to, and you're not running around trying to get everyone aligned in kind of that stressful moment. Obviously, there will be some risks and situations that you cannot predict, and we're living through one right now. And I think that then the key is to build super, super strong processes internally. So make sure you have kind of a COVID response team that's meeting and ensuring that you're all aligned, ensuring you have really good internal communication that's sharing what you're doing, why you're doing it, the why behind everything, and is being really honest about the challenges you're facing, not trying to sugarcoat, and bringing your employees with you.
That is great advice. Thank you. So next, we have, as our members continue to grow their networks, managers and executives have a fiduciary responsibility to the owners and the shareholders to focus on profits. So focusing on revenue growth, new subscribers, finding efficiencies. Emma, what are some of the steps that you have taken to kind of improve upon efficiencies or really drive everything down to the bottom line?
So I think this goes back to what is your kind of mission statement. We are really focused on providing great service. So I would say we actually haven't necessarily driven everything to the bottom line. We're trying to create a great service for kind of underserved customers and then price accordingly. So we're not trying to be the cheapest or the kind of bargain player. We think we have phenomenal customer service, a really great customer offering, and can kind of charge commensurate with that. So it doesn't necessarily have to be about just making sure you're as low priced. You can also offer a differentiated product and ensure that you charge what you're worth and what your value is. So I think it's a slightly different way of looking at it. One thing I would say though is if we do that annual planning process once, and then we're able to look at kind of the IRR of all those projects next to each other. So you can also evaluate what project's going to get me the best return. And by doing it that way, you're able to invest the limited dollars you might have into the most impactful projects, which also helps drive your profit.
Oh, perfect. And John, you've been on the operator side as well. Can you recommend any steps to improve upon efficiencies?
Well, for profitability, I think economies of scale are key. And there's a slide that's coming up shortly that illustrates it perfectly. I'm not really sure if that's a slide you created or where it came from. And I'm not even suggesting we go there now, but I will tell you that when we get to that slide, you'll see that as you grow your company, your fixed costs remain the same. Your variable costs do increase as you add more customers, but ideally, the amount of profits that you derive are directly related to how much scale you can derive from your business. And so for those that are willing and able to grow their businesses and expand their businesses, that's where you see profits. I mean, that's just the name of the game. You can cut costs only so much, but revenues are king. And to get those, you need customers and you need monthly recurring revenues. And so thinking about things like taking on debt when it's needed, obviously I'm in a position where that's I can help with that. It's something that I can show people how to make that bring more profit into their business, more cash flow. The little pane that shows EBITDA. If you're more of a tech-oriented person and you don't really know what that is, you may have heard other people talk about it, but it's very key. It's something you need to learn. It's earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. And that's a lot of words and a lot of syllables in finance talk. But what it boils down to is that it tells how much cash opportunity there is for profits and to pay down debt. And it's key to how much profit you put in your pocket and how much growth you can grow in the future. So if you don't learn anything else out of this entire presentation, if you're an operator and you don't know what EBITDA is, read up on it, talk to your accountant, talk to your bookkeeper, and start focusing on it and find ways of improving it. And as you do, you'll earn more money and you'll be able to leverage the EBITDA for taking on debt to build yourselves into a much bigger operation. And that's it's key for your profits.
Oh, perfect. And then Heather, a lot of our WISP operators also manage vertical real estate similar to Crown, obviously not to the scale of Crown. But what are some of the advices that you can give our operators in terms of managing vertical real estate and being able to maximize profit off of that?
Yeah, I think, one of the key things that we really focus on is we really look at kind of the location, the pop tiers, and the details around our assets. And, it's one where when you're looking at if you're investing in your own infrastructure, you want to make sure that you're marketing that appropriately too. And it gets to be challenging, right? So you're in a particular area that's a bit more rural. Right now, you're the only show in town. You've built some of your own infrastructure, but you'd like to monetize it, right? So how do you do that in a really smart way without necessarily letting a competitor come in the back door? And that can be challenging. So that's where instead of necessarily turning to more of a co-location model, which is what you really see from some of the big tower companies like ourselves, American Tower, SBA, is you really want to start to focus on growing that revenue by adding additional adjacent business lines, right? So you already have existing infrastructure out there. You already have an existing network. You already have a subscriber base. How do you grow that? And how do you leverage additional opportunities? And that's where you start to get into vertical opportunities in a market. Can you start to support schools? Can you start to support healthcare? I think right now, we've seen even on our side of the business where even some of our rural WISP customers are on some of our infrastructure that's more rural, is we've seen an uptick right now for them to support more homeschooling, more educational focus, even like pop-up medical testing facilities. And we're supporting that effort. So I think even right now, I think there's an opportunity to say, hey, let's take a look at what we potentially even could leverage our existing footprint for today to drive some additional adjacent business lines. Because I think there's definitely an opportunity even right now to do some of that with some of the things that we've seen going on. Even locally here in North Carolina, I don't have great service at my own house. Half the time I'm hotspotting, right? And it's one where when you think about that, there's definitely opportunities out there given the environment.
Yeah, and I think that all breaks down to when we look at our fixed costs and variable costs as fixed wireless operators, especially with managing vertical real estate. If we've built a tower and that's configured for 3 carriers and you only have 1 carrier that's on there, you've got a lot of vacant real estate that it really doesn't cost you anything more to manage if you add the additional revenue lines of renting out the 2 other RADs. So just take a look at what you have for available real estate, and that should trickle down to be able to maximize some profits. So next, just wanted to break down a couple different cost to serve models. So most WISPs can break that down into a couple different ways. It could either be like an edge out deployment, which would be a logical expansion of the existing footprint. Could be adjacent market where they're just expanding to another market. And then a new market expansion would be a completely different market, which has different costs that are associated, whether that's long haul transport, maybe you have to set up a different satellite office. So, Emma, Midco has seen a tremendous amount of growth, both organically and then also through acquisition. Can you describe some of the steps that Midco has done to kind of evaluate markets, and what's the best cost to serve model? Because you both operate a cable company and then also some fixed wireless assets as well.
Yeah, and I think the answer to that is the best cost to serve model is the one that works best for you and has the best return. So it will be totally different depending on where you are and what situation you're in. We've done all of these. And it really just depends on kind of what Heather was taking us through before of who are the customers, how big is the market, and then where to this point are you already set up? So do you already have an office, techs in the area, access to fiber, or do you need to create those? We're doing both. We're doing both through a lot of our CAF expansion. We're kind of growing from our legacy market, which is up in North Dakota, all the way down to kind of southern South Dakota, which is requiring totally new techs who've worked on the cable side to learn about the fixed wireless side. And we decided that was the right investment because one, it was the right thing to do. There was a lot of people who didn't have access to broadband. And two, we knew that we could bring it and bring it at a reasonable cost to serve. So this one's tricky because there's no right answer, but I think what this does say is you should evaluate both. Don't just do edge out because it's easiest. John was pointing out like growth opens opportunities and opens economies of scale. So if you are just looking at kind of your edges, maybe look around. Is there an adjacent market? Is there something a little bit further away that you might have to take on some debt, but could be a really big opportunity for you?
Thank you. And John, you have a lot of experience with the fixed wireless operation as well. Do you have anything to add to this?
I just almost have to echo what Emma said, especially near the end there, that if you want to grow your business, you can't just pick one and go that way. It really does boil down to what do you have in front of you? Do you have a lot of small competitors around you that would inhibit your ability to do an edge out deployment without overbuilding them? Because that's really not a smart play. So the smarter play in that situation would be to look at those adjacent market operators and talk to them. Is one of them much bigger than yourself? Are you putting yourself in a disadvantage by not talking to them about becoming part of their company? Through merging, or maybe they buy you out and put you to work. Even though that may not be something that people really like to think about, as you said at the beginning, Jason, exit has to be there at the beginning. You have to think about what happens when you get to the end of the run. And you have to always be building and designing your plan around what does that do with my exit strategy. That has to be part of it. So if you're only doing edge out deployments and you're just trying to gobble up everybody's vertical real estate all around you, that's not a smart play. Look at putting together opportunities to partner with other people, buy other people. Certainly new markets is something that everyone likes. If you see an area that is not being served, all problems are opportunities, all of them. If you see an area that's not getting broadband, these people are going to be very upset that they don't have broadband. This could be very easy to make a business case in most cases, even for very sparsely populated areas. WISPs know how to do things at a very low cost point, and they do it routinely. That's why they are so strong and embedded. They're not going away. And so new market opportunities in rural America certainly are big opportunities for us. I have to applaud you, Jason, in being able to operate and do what you've done on such an amazing scale in a highly populated area. There's not very many WISP operators that have been able to compete on the level that you have. But it proves out that there's more than one way to do this cost of service model, and each person looks at it differently.
Oh, thank you, John. And actually, one of the things that we've done that has been very successful as part of our growth strategy, we wanted to get on that with a lot of the fiber providers. So Heather's company has certainly been a good partner. We also have, we look at them for vertical real estate as well. So as we look towards adjacent market and new market expansions, we're looking at that by building into some areas where we can take some NNIs from some of the fiber transport providers, get affordable transport, and then work with the larger tower companies to be able to bring new towers online. And what that looks like in some markets is maybe we just need one anchor tenant to be able to get the service. So we could take low-cost, affordable fiber transport out to one of those towers, and we could provide last-mile redundancy in for an anchor tenant. That gives us a reason for being on one of those towers, and then we can then expand from there if there's additional opportunities to provide service to unserved or underserved markets. So I would just say if you're looking at building out into adjacent markets or new market strategies, get your network a little bit closer to some affordable fiber transport, and then work with the tower companies to be able to expand into some new markets. So it's all about partnership.
A lot of the independents, if you don't mind me saying, a lot of the independents are actually starting to do their own fiber now, and which is, I just have to applaud them to take on such a monumental step. And it does take a lot of cash to do that. So you probably have to have a strong EBITDA in order to go out and borrow the money to put out that fiber. But then you can do that. And a lot of guys are doing it themselves, which lowers the cost basis, which was another slide we talked about. So just wanted to throw that in there.
Oh, perfect. And Heather's done a good job of putting together this slide as well. So leveraging infrastructure partners. Would you be able to expand on that a little bit, Heather?
Yeah, Jason, certainly to some of your points about leveraging kind of, tower company partners, this plays into that. And it really plays into how you are looking at those different, cost models is, which way do you want to go? And you really want to look at leveraging existing infrastructure, assets that you currently have, expertise in the marketplace, and really a lot of data as well, and aggregating that. So when you look at multiple components, like obviously pop density is like near and dear, where some of those more rural markets are, you potentially know where you could pick up a lot more subscribers if you're able to go through a certain area as well. So that's one piece of it. So mapping those target areas and seeing where those maximum opportunities are. And then site selection starts to become key. Again, you could evaluate self-performance if that makes sense, look at existing infrastructure. When you're looking at existing infrastructure, a couple of key things are really ensuring that, is there power to the site? Is there fiber near or on net, right? All of those things start to play into your ability to deploy in a very efficient and quick manner, and also can play into timelines. You also have jurisdictional fees and requirements like zoning, permitting, FAA, SHPO. The list can go on and on, right? But I think it's one where a lot of this information, I know, even with our team that we have, out in the field, they have a lot of this information at their fingertips because we've done work on our existing infrastructure. Leverage your partners for that. Anyone that, you're looking at leveraging infrastructure that's existing, in many cases, they have this information and they'll provide it to you. I know it's certainly something that my team will do. And then you can start to put these layers together. So you can look at pop tier, you can look at competitive assets, you can look at fiber in the area. You already know what those zoning, permitting, jurisdictional things are. If you're going to have a long lead time to get power to the site, like it starts to allow you to map out that plan and that timing for when you can bring that asset online, when you can start to provide service to those subscribers. And so that starts to really play into your overall plan and timing. And then there's that other play, right? So if you were to take all of these things and layer them in together, including vertical opportunities, which we have talked about, which is like that education, healthcare, government, public safety, anyone else you could support in those areas, and you literally look at all of them at once, that helps you to drive like where's the biggest impact when I'm looking at all this data? And Jason, if you want to flip, I think the next one is like a good map demonstration of like what this looks like when you put it to work, right? This looks really busy right now, but if you actually drill down into the layers, it's one where this shows, a certain geographic area. The lines show you any of the fiber that's in the area. So you see where fiber assets are. Maybe there's a tower site that's near or on net or close. It also shows you via color, like the pop density. Where are the people physically at? Where are there more versus less? Where are those edge out where you can pick up some folks, but also maybe shoot through an area where there's more population. And then there's also, on this particular map, we've also started to label in those adjacent opportunities. Where's the school? Where's the medical facility? Where's the hospital, right? Where are those other opportunities where you could provide service to them as well? So you look at that full picture at once, putting all of that data to work as you're looking at those cost models. And in many cases, tower companies like ourselves, like Crown, we have these data sets available in various forms. It took me, I think, a few days, but I had, one of our analysts kind of pull this together, and he was able to produce this, like where you can look at it in one view. And so that's something where, also definitely look at your partners to say, hey, do you have this information available? Instead of you sitting there mining data, spending, valuable hours of time, you may actually be able to pull something like this from one of your tower partners in a very efficient way and pretty quickly. Like, hey, does this market even make sense? I'm thinking about it. If you were able to see this day one, does that help you to expedite that decision and that analysis? So definitely leverage your partners when you're putting data to work for yourself as well.
Oh, perfect. And then the next slide just brings in the other variable, which could be grant funding in certain markets. So that could be an opportunity in some cases, or if you're on the losing side of a grant award, then that could be a threat. So as we start breaking down different opportunities, we've seen grants come in different forms and fashions. Maybe a grant comes in a CapEx reimbursement, where typically it would be like a 70 or 80% subsidy from a state or state government partner, or it could be from like an EDC. In the term of, if you look at the CAF2 awards or any of the RDOF awards, there's usually some pricing that might come in the form of OPEX. So Emma, John, Heather, feel free to jump in. How does grant funding play into the overall structure of some of the strategy?
I can jump in there. It's something that you should always have on your radar and be continually evaluating, right? So there's not just kind of FCC grants, there's also state grants. There's a whole range of grant money. And I would encourage everyone to have a person or a team that's looking at what's coming up and thinking through what makes the most sense for you to take. It can feel like free money, but it's not, right? It always has lots of things that go along with it. And so it's not the right choice for everyone to take that money. You need to make sure that you are able to fulfill the commitments that come along with it. So I think being really intentional about where it makes sense for you and where it doesn't, and using all that information Heather just shared. Like, I love that idea of using your partners to get more information about kind of the areas you're in and around. Really going in with a database decision on where do I think I will be able to use this money very impactfully, be able to fulfill my obligations, and be able to get a great return. There is a little bit of offense too, because when you get overbilled, when grant funding comes in and overbills you, that can feel rubbish. And so then you also need to evaluate not just where would I do it in the absence of no other competitors, but where do I maybe want to take grant money so someone else doesn't take it. So that's a little bit of kind of looking at the pieces on the chessboard and thinking through, I really need to keep this area myself. I don't want a competitor to come in and kind of get a hold in my territory or my footprint.
Yeah, and it's certainly helpful for network upgrades and bringing your equipment up to the next level. But it's also very challenging to come into certain areas and then spend money on infrastructure, and then next thing you know, you're competing with a subsidized provider. So you definitely need to know what areas may or may not be eligible for grant subsidies, and then plan your construction around that. So Heather, you had done a good job of putting together this slide about growing your customer base. Would you be able to dig into that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I know we touched upon this earlier too, like as we talked about vision and cascading that down to your like entire employee base. But when you think about the core of this too, you also have to think about that internal promise. Like, what is that brand promise going to be out into the marketplace? And so it's really carefully focusing on what the tone and the call to action when you're crafting that message is. Really using the data and analyzing it to focus on what are those niches that you want to go into, what's the strategy to penetrate those markets, and then what's your differentiator? Is it cost? Is it quality? What's that really focused going to be? And you really want to hone in on that early, because as you start to push marketing out, you want to make sure that one, you're reaching the right people at the right time with the right message. You want it to be impactful. You want it to drive, subscribers. And then you also want to make sure that if you're doing that in the most concise manner and the most efficient way, you're also not spending marketing dollars that aren't effective, right? So you want to make sure that you've done all of that homework. You're really focused on what your brand promise is. That matches really well with what the customer's needs are in that market, your products that you have available at that time to offer to them. And so when you really do that, you want to focus on that so you really can drive the most impact with the least amount of dollars when you think about the marketing side of it. And so, there's, kind of a, do you want to be impacted by faster speeds, or are you faster than someone else? Like, what's that super promise that you feel that, you can push to the marketplace, people will trust you, you can deliver on it. That's a really good piece of that. So you want to make sure that before you push a brand promise out from a marketing perspective, you've got the backbone to support that, right? Like, if it's going to be quality, you want to make sure that quality is there, because that's the other thing too to be really focused on is potentially this going south, right? So if you're out in front of it and you really have looked at deep into your business and what that niche is going to be and how you're going to craft that, you really should be able to make a good impact. And you want to make those targets measured. You want to keep them tight. If you kind of oversaturate folks, that also could impact your ability to drive subscribers. So you want to be really focused about how you approach them when you're growing that customer.
Yeah, and I would also encourage the WISP operators to know the customer base as well. There's a lot of demographic information that's out there. There's a lot of competition information that's out there. So if you're going to be going in and offering 10 meg plans and there's already fiber to the home in the community, you may not want to waste any marketing dollars on that. Or if you're going to be offering $200 a month plans to a low or moderate income community, it might not be the best fit. So I would say know your audience, and then you should be able to boost your adoption rates. And Emma, do you have anything to add on this?
No, I think that this idea of the right people at the right time with the right message is so important, and it can be hard to know what that is unless you sit down and really think about that in advance. So I totally agree, Jason. You got to know who your people are and what sort of message they want to hear. And in addition to the things you just spoke about, I also think just ask your customers, right? Sometimes we forget that we have customers who can tell us what they want and what they want to hear. And so sometimes it can be as simple as kind of a CX survey saying, are we doing what you want? Like, what else do you want to see? And then building out from there and changing your messaging based on what people told you they like to hear. So don't forget that you have a really important asset base of knowledge kind of out there already.
Oh, perfect. So the next slide, we wanted to talk about TCO, or total cost of ownership, and then how that goes into different strategies for selecting technology, whether that be deploying wireline infrastructure, traditional fixed wireless offering, or there's a lot of companies that are doing LTE. So there's different decisions that go into the CapEx side and the OpEx side of each one of the deployments. And a lot of times it depends on what is the company's cash position, what's their long-term growth strategies. So Emma, your company's deployed both wireline and wireless technology. What are some of the things that kind of go into the decision of what technology to use and what markets?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the biggest decision is evaluating what is going to be kind of the capital that we would have to invest to reach each home in a certain area. So on the wireline side, it's much higher capital to reach kind of rural areas or even more urban areas than it is to implement a fixed wireless solution. So you can immediately weigh up there and just say, based on the density and kind of the penetration I think I'm going to get, can I make that capital investment off the bat to say, should this be wireline? And if the capital would be too expensive, then a fixed wireless solution can work really, really well. But it comes with higher operating costs. So you have to weigh up that balance of where do I want my dollars to go? Do I want them to go in CapEx or do I want them to go in OpEx? And then when you're kind of in that fixed wireless bucket and you're thinking through what sort of technology solution do I want here, I would encourage people to think through, what are you looking for? Are you looking for technology that you'd have to swap out every couple years? Do you want a longer run lifetime on them? That might kind of impact your decision to go LTE or not. I would also say that one thing to evaluate is are you using a vendor that's proprietary? So they can be cheaper to use a proprietary vendor, but in the long run, it might be more expensive as you're really locked into that relationship. That can have pros and cons, but make sure you decide up front, I'm willing to take these cons along with the pros because I've thought about it and we've decided proprietary is the right choice for us. Or not, as the case may be.
Yeah, and we've seen deployment costs when we're looking at wireline deployments. It could be anywhere from like $25,000 to $40,000 per linear mile, and it's a lot more upfront costs, but there's usually lower maintenance and OpEx that's associated with that, and it's more of a long-term strategic investment. When we started off the business, I don't know how many years ago, we started deploying traditional fixed wireless gear, and you could set up a small micropop or a tower for a few $100s. And now we've grown from a few $100s to, if I'm deploying a 64T, 64R massive MIMO deployment, I could be over $100,000 for a tower. So the return on each one of those scenarios is different, and it's going to play into your market, whether you're looking at density. Are you looking at just doing fixed wireless operations, or is it going to be any type of IoT type deployment? So each total cost of ownership decision is really unique to the operator's markets. So next slide, we wanted to get into some of the breakdowns. What we've seen, some of the smaller operators, myself included, we typically focus on return on investment and break-even analysis. I had a good conversation with Emma yesterday, and we started talking about NPV and IRR. And Emma, can you kind of break down what are the advantages of looking at break-even, ROI, NPV, IRR, and how do you look at projects?
So, you can look at projects at any way that works for you. That's kind of whatever. If you can understand it and make good decisions based off of it, then use the metric that works in your company. I encourage people to look at IRR because it gives you a better way of evaluating projects against each other, right? It really says, if I have project A and project B and project C, which one gets me the best rate of return for the dollars I spend? Because none of us have unlimited dollars. So if you just look at break-even point, you might take something that breaks even a little bit earlier, but actually project C would have gotten you a higher return over the long run. I also encourage people to kind of balance IRR with NPV, which is kind of the net present value of those dollars that you're deploying, because something could have a phenomenal IRR, but actually not get you that many dollars. It could be a small opportunity. So you might still want to do that, but then you should look at your internal resources and say, okay, for a smaller opportunity, do I want to resource a team on this? We only have so many hours in the day. So I would balance NPV and IRR before I look at break-even point. Then I would look at break-even point and say, ooh, even though this has a great rate of return, even though it would get us a lot of money, it's not going to break even for 7 years. Can I take that loss for 7 years? What does my cash flow model look like? And can I kind of stand that? So that's how I would look at it. I think it might take your decisions and use your dollars a little bit more impactfully than just looking at that break-even point will do.
No, thank you. And then Heather, did you have anything to add on that? How would your company look at some long-term projects?
What's interesting is that, you kind of have all three metrics, listed here: ROI, your NPV, looking at break even. And it's funny because when we kind of look at projects, whether it's building last mile fiber, whether it's, deploying a venue, whether it's, building a tower in a new area, we actually literally skin the cat every single way and look at, all of that at once. Because it's one where you want to know what that long-term is. When we kind of present something to higher up, if it is a really high value investment, they were building out an entire market, with small cell deployment for 5G, they want to see all of it, right? They want to see okay, how long will we have to incur some debt, related to the amount of capital we're spending, all of that. So it's interesting because, it's one where you need to focus on what you feel like your business is most comfortable with. But I think it's really powerful to look at all of these side by side. That's what it's funny because our model actually does that. It has inputs and tabs for all of them.
Okay. So the next is basically focusing on the fact that cash is king, and operators typically need funding and financing to grow the networks. It looks like actually I think John had some technical difficulties, so he might have dropped off of the chat, but we might be able to cover for him a little bit. So when we look at the different options, so whether you raise debt or you raise equity, Emma, what are some of the pros and cons for the different types of funding? Whether you pull in financial partners like PE or VC or angels, or you work with banks, or you try and go out and do some grant funding. What are some of the pros and cons for each one of those?
Yeah, I think that they each have sort of different incentives themselves. So it's important to understand what is your partner, what are they looking to get out of this, and do their goals align with your goals? So if you're looking at kind of PE, VC, angel investor money, we started this conversation talking about exits. A lot of times that money is also looking for an exit, and you should have a good understanding of what their time horizon is for that, and is it aligned with what you're thinking? Because if you have different ideas about when you want to exit, when you want to sell, when they want to sell, you could find yourself in a sticky situation in kind of those 5 to 10 years. I think grant funding, we touched on this, just make sure you really understand what those requirements are and kind of what that, if you do a public-private partnership or if you take a state, local, or federal grant, what are the time horizons? What sort of terms are there on the letter of credits? And the same with banks. So I would encourage people to look at all three and look at the terms that different partners offer you, and definitely take into consideration, what's going to be my cheapest cost of capital, but also think about who's going to be my best partner. Because if there's two that are, relatively similar, one's a little bit cheaper than the other, you might want the slightly more expensive capital with a partner that's really in it with you for the long haul, who's going to support you and stand with you in tough times like we're seeing right now. Up to the individual.
Oh, perfect. So it looks like John is having technical difficulties joining back in, so we might be able to cover a little bit with the loan approval. But if you guys, if anybody in the audience has questions specific to any of the SBA funded loans, I would encourage you to email John directly, and he should be able to help you out through some of that process. He's been his team has been working literally 24/7 since the passing of the CARES Act to process loans and put some funding in the hands of operators. Some of the recent programs that he's been working on is economic disaster loans, the PPP, which is Paycheck Protection, and he's been working on various SBA 7A loans, and then other types of loans, just to put some immediate capital into some of the operators' hands. So, unfortunately, he's not able to join us for this portion of the presentation, but I would definitely encourage everybody to email him directly afterwards, and he'd be able to help you out with some of the process. And then also with the business plan, John would be able to offer some advice to some of the fixed wireless operators on how to prepare some of the business plans. There's some specific financial ratios that some of the banks are looking for. We've seen some banks, some of the particularly cash flow lenders, are looking for debt service coverage ratios of 1.25, and they want to be basically certain that if you borrow some money, are you able to service your debt and then reasonably pay back some of those funds? Heather and Emma, you also have a lot of experience with preparing plans. Do you have anything to add on some advice for our operators to put together some viable business plans and then how to present that to lending institutions to get funded?
I think we covered some of this too as we walk through like the planning phases, right? So when you think about, when you go in to apply for financing and, what they would be looking for is they want to know that you've done all of that homework, right? They want to know that you've done the analysis on here's my opportunities, here's how I plan to go after it, here's the products that I have to offer that fit that market. Here's what our goal is and how we're going to get there. Is what's that full plan, so that end to end, some of those things we talked to about like, what's your vision, what's your product set, what's your target market, knowing your competition, indicating that you're very aware of what the marketplace looks like and the threats and opportunities as a result. So that a lot of those things we talked about today really roll into that and presenting that in a very organized fashion. That's definitely what they're going to be looking for. And I'm sure Emma can offer some, additional insights too.
Yeah, I would second that, and I would say be realistic. I think sometimes if you're going in to raise money, you might have these like really grand plans. I would encourage you to be very concrete, like here's where I'm going to get, and here's all the steps that are going to get me there, and here's how I'm going to measure them. So be real, be transparent, and be very concrete, so that whoever's looking at the plan can feel really confident in your ability to execute on it.
Thank you. And then I wanted to end with basically a general discussion on COVID-19, that we seem to be living in the new normal now, where telecommuting is normal, telehealth, everything basically, where I don't know how many Zoom sessions that I've been on recently and go to meetings. And it just seems like we're living in a virtual world, and the communities that we provide service into are becoming more reliant on the connections that we provide. So just wanted to open it up to Emma and Heather. And how can WISPs take advantage of some of the opportunities amidst the chaos? And how do we leverage some of these opportunities to grow our business and also help some of the communities that we provide service in?
Heather, take it away.
So I know John will definitely, so I think this is another opportunity to reach out to him too when it comes to the PPP loans. So I definitely want to encourage folks to do that during this time as well. And I know he was going to talk about some of that too. So certainly utilize him as a resource. But I think the one thing that we are seeing in the marketplace is that what we found is that as you're seeing like additional needs, additional opportunities to add subscribers, especially given this teleworking environment that we're all in now, is that we have seen an uptick is even though jurisdictions might be closed or quarantining documents or doing certain things, we've seen very receptive responses to, hey, we'd like to add equipment to this. We obviously have our application in. Your offices are closed. Like if you get someone on the phone, in many cases, we've seen some approvals even come through like overnight or within like 2 days. So like even that side of things is operating a little bit outside of the norm. So don't assume that because the requirements normally are X, Y, and Z, that's going to apply right now. There's a lot of support for, first off, critical infrastructure. In most cases, you're not going to really see too much hold back on those. But certainly if you're definitely focused on, supporting, folks that have educational homeschooling, your subscriber base is really focused on that, and there's some limitations. We've seen a ton of receptive help when we've called into jurisdictions on behalf of our customers to say, hey, we know you guys are closed. Is there a way to push this through? We'd like them to get to install. We've already done all the homework, right? The structurals ran, everything's safe. It's just a matter of the stamp of, hey, you're okay to go out there and, deploy construction. So I would say, definitely focus on that and don't be shy about it, because we've been pleasantly surprised with the support we've seen.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice. Just because the world feels like it's on pause doesn't mean we have to be on pause as a critical industry. The other thing I would say is the future is very uncertain to all of us. And so it's okay to not know what's going to happen, but it's not okay to not plan for what's going to happen. So we talked earlier about kind of looking at worst case to best case scenarios. And I would encourage everyone to think through what's my realistic worst case scenario and what's my realistic best case scenario, and then map out how you would manage both. So managing cash has never been more important. Realistically, how are you going to manage cash for the next 6 to 12 to longer months, and making sure you have a really concrete plan, like where could you get better terms, et cetera, et cetera. On the best case scenario, I think that there is some opportunity. Maybe we were talking earlier about, combining companies. There might be some companies that weren't up for sale that may now be up for sale. Are you really thinking through what that looks like in your footprint? Who you might want to start having some friendly conversations with, and really kind of come together as a WISP community to help one another out, but also look for opportunities. So I think from the worst case to the best case, we need to be thinking through what could happen and ensure that you know what you'll do in those scenarios, and that'll continuously evolve, but start building your plans for both.
Oh, perfect. And it actually looks like John has joined back. So just in the nick of time. If you have a good audio connection, what I'd like to do is reverse a couple of the slides. So, and then have you talk about the business plan as well as the loan approval process.
Sure. Thank you so much, and I apologize for being disconnected. I'm not really sure what happened, but glad to be back with you guys. The loan approval process. So a lot of people don't realize, I certainly didn't when I was a WISP operator, I didn't realize the power of SBA loans and the accessibility that's there for independent broadband providers, WISP operators, fiber operators to access the SBA and leverage every bit of borrowing power you have to the fullest extent possible, much more than standard commercial lending would allow you to do. In many cases, a banker normally would look at an operation based on the amount of collateral that you have to put up to borrow. And SBA lending will allow you to leverage your cash flows in such a way that you can borrow money for as much as 10 years without any covenants, and for fixed broadband wireless, and out as far as 20 years for fiber. So these are both good things to think about. And the loan approval process is actually not as difficult as one might think. You have to make sure that you have at least decent credit. You should not have any bankruptcies in your past if you expect to get access to government guaranteed lending, such as the SBA. That opportunity probably goes away in most cases if you have a bankruptcy in your past. Even if it falls off your credit record, it will still show up in searches. So that's something to keep in mind if you have existing defaults that would prevent you from being approved for a loan. But on the optimistic side, if you have good cash flows, if you have a strong EBITDA that we talked about earlier, then you can leverage those cash flows into paying long-term debt at bank rate financing through SBA. And so that's something to consider. Obviously, there are other ways of borrowing money through. You can use your local bank for commercial loans, and many cases they will want collateral to, and most people just won't collateralize the CPE cash flows all that well. But through the SBA, you can do that. It's something that I help people with frequently, involving both WISPs and fiber operations. And so the things you want to keep in mind are to make sure that you have decent credit, that you're able to confidently and eloquently and accurately display what you plan to do with your project. You have to usually have 2 or 3 years of proven growth, at least, in your business and profitability to be able to achieve a loan. But then you can leverage that and show and project into the future the growth that you will attain by leveraging your financing. And using those historical numbers will allow you to do that. You can show, over 2 or 3 years, this is how much I grew my business. This is what happened with my fixed costs, my variable costs, and the amount of profitability, as in the slide that was presented earlier. And then you can prove to a banker that you have an operation that's worthy of being capitalized for further growth. And whether you're a WISP looking to expand into fiber, a WISP that's maybe wanting to upgrade into new areas like CBRS, or just to upgrade your equipment, these are all things that you can do with bank rate financing without having to just grow organically out of your own profits. It's nice to have cash flow. It's nice to make money. And you can do that with debt financing. And it's a lot harder to do that just trying to grow everything organically. You will hit a wall eventually if you do that. Operators find that point usually around the 800 to 1,200 customer range. All of a sudden, it's an operation they can no longer just grow out of their checkbook. And so I didn't mean to go on and on, but do you have any other things to follow up and ask about that?
Just when's the proper time to ask for money, John? Is that when you've run out, or you need a little bit of planning?
Oh, you certainly don't want to wait till you run out. It's always better to reflect on some of the things that our esteemed panel, I'm sure, have driven home, all of you guys, and talking about the fact that you need to plan. And part of the plan is not running out of money. That shows that you're not really planning very well if you do that. So you want to make sure that you have, steady cash flows and that you have free cash flows and a strong EBITDA. You want to be able to eloquently talk about your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. You want to do so confidently. But you want to make sure that you're factual in what you present. One of the best things you can do in a business plan scenario is to build what I would call best case, worst case, and reality pro formas. And what that shows that you've used a lot of thoughtful processes in looking at your business and what you think could happen in ideal scenarios, stress scenarios, and what you project as being actually where you think it's going to go. And that plan of where you think it's going to go is probably going to be based largely on what you're able to prove from what you've done historically. So, but showing all three is something that anyone in the banking industry is going to look at and say, this person has done their homework. They understand, what the best opportunities are, the worst, and where they think things are going to go, and they've explained why. And so they're a good credit risk. And so that's very important.
So John, for some of the people that are new to business plans, can you explain what a pro forma financial analysis is?
Jason, I have a hard stop, so I'm going to have to jump off here, but thank you guys very much. It was a pleasure chatting with you.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much, Emma.
Thank you, Emma. And so with a pro forma, what you do is you break out over time, usually on a monthly, quarterly basis, whatever, and you project that into the future, 3 years, 5 years, and you show what your business is going to do with the plans that you have in place. And the way you do that is, again, to use historical numbers of your business to prove that you are able to grow your business over time, and then project that into the future. That's what a pro forma does. And so if you're someone that has a great deal of experience of putting those together, then certainly that's something you should do yourself. But if you don't, then in my case, I wasn't that good with finances. So I would lean on my accountant and my bookkeeper for things like that. And so find someone that's strong in finance and work with them to build that plan. But you want to be confident in showing what it is that you plan to do and have real data that backs up why you think those numbers are real and why you think they represent what will happen when you're able to achieve the goals and financing growth and projecting into the future.
Oh, thank you. And then I think you do a lot with cash flow lending. Are there any specific financial ratios that you look for within some of the financial projections?
Yeah, so the best way to think about this is that you look at the total amount of free cash flow, and that number is derived largely from your net operating income, and what we do is what we call adding back. We add back the non-cash expenses, things like depreciation, amortization, into your net operating income. That's something that you can look at on your income statement, P&L, or balance sheet, and you can take that and add back the depreciation, amortization, divide that by your annualized debt payments that you make on your business, and that provides what they call a debt service coverage ratio. And in my particular instance, I look for a minimum of a 1.25 debt service coverage ratio, which means that for every dollar that you want to have going out per year for debt, you need to have $1.25 coming in.
Nope, that's a good way to describe that. So I know that we're going to be running up against the clock. We were closing with the COVID-19. What are some of the various opportunities for WISPs? And you had certainly touched on a lot on what's out there for financing, and I'd like to probably close the presentation with that. What we've seen amidst some of the chaos is there's opportunities for the WISP community to go out and help the communities that they serve. And there might be some additional opportunities to work closely with government agencies, healthcare, first responders, to kind of shore up some of their networks and look at basically innovative solutions to bridge the digital divide. What I do know about our WISPA membership is we're usually pretty quick to react in certain circumstances. We're also very quick to deploy, but we need cash to do that. So, John, is there any advice that you can give some of the WISP operators on how to secure some of the necessary cash to be in a position to help their communities?
Yes, there are several that are available, and one of the top resources to look at for the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program, or EIDL, those are all located at sba.gov. And those are what are known as direct loan programs. In other words, you would work directly with the SBA on those programs. There's one that provides up to $10,000 that doesn't have to be paid back, and it can be applied for quickly and easily online. There's another program that is a loan. That's a $25,000 advance that would be used for Sba Express borrowers. If you're an Sba Express borrower, you have an Sba Express loan in place with a lender, then you can get up to $25,000 advanced through that. That also is in anticipation of an EIDL loan, which would be another direct program that you can apply for through the SBA. The PPP, or the Paycheck Protection Program, is something that I have a great deal of knowledge about. The others are something you really need to use sba.gov as a resource to have full guidance on that. But the Paycheck Protection Program, I can help you. And the way the Paycheck Protection Program works is that it's set up like an SBA loan, but it's a very fast loan. It's when you apply for and receive really fast. And it allows you to get up to 2.5 times your monthly payroll in the form of a forgivable loan, or a loan you pay off at 1% interest over 24 months. And I'll explain the differences on that here. Basically, you can take the amount of payroll, health insurance, a 401k, or other IRA type contributions that an employer makes on behalf of their employees. You can add that all up and get your monthly average. and take that times 2.5, and that gives you the amount of money that's available through the program. Once you get that big packet of money issued to you, which it's done very quickly, we're processing them on the order of around 7 days turnaround, or less. You can take that, you have 8 weeks from the date you receive the money to then spend that on payroll. And since it's 2.5 months worth, you can't actually spend it all on payroll if you have the exact same number of employees. So the other, it's like 25% of that money, you can use it for things like interest on your mortgage payments, utilities, or rent related to your business. As long as you maintain that ratio of 75% of it being used for payroll and 25% for the other uses I mentioned, you can apply for, at the end of that 8-week period, you have 60 days to apply for forgiveness. Forgiveness allows you the opportunity to completely have all of that debt erased, waived, if you meet the forgiveness obligations as determined by the SBA. A quality lender that works with you, hint, hint, can help you make sure that forgiveness opportunity is met. And so choose wisely on your choice of lender. If you do not meet forgiveness, the first 6 months is waived or what they call deferred on the principal. The interest is paid by the SBA, which leaves a remaining 18-month runway for payoff of the loan. That would be at 1% interest, and it automatically just turns into a loan at the end for any unforgiven amount. And anything you have questions about that?
No, it just seems like a popular program. I assume you probably want to encourage people to apply right away.
Most certainly. The funding window is probably going to close in the first round. There's much discussion and debate about whether it will be funded a second round. The overarching guidance that we see from DC is that they do want to fund this for another round. So it's a good idea to get your application together. It's a Form 2483 on the SBA website. If you want to fill it out, it's like a 2-page form. I have the forms available if anybody wants them. It requires you usually to submit like 4 quarters usually of your 941s that are used that you file with the IRS regarding the payroll, and then justification for any other expenses for healthcare, retirement, etc., that you use for calculating the 2.5 times average monthly for your loan amount.
Oh, perfect. And then it seems like there's going to be some opportunities to expand some of the networks into some more of the unserved areas. And we've seen the political stars that are lining up. And that may even help with some regulatory issues and some siting issues. When all the constituents in a community need broadband, typically the politics align to be able to push some of those approvals through a little bit sooner than normal. So I would encourage everybody to take a look at expanding out into some of the areas, getting much needed services out to the communities. And Heather, did you have anything that you wanted to close with there?
No, I mean, I think the biggest thing for us is, as an infrastructure provider, we're here to support you guys during this time. We've also taken, kind of the broad pledge I think most of you have seen. So if you are having some hardships, definitely reach out to your local market representative at Crown to help during these times as well.
Oh, perfect. So I just want to close with, if there's any questions that WISPs need answered, feel free to email any of the panelists, and we're here to help. So with that, thank you.
Thank you, Jason.